Hello and welcome back to Phoenix, Arizona. We are here at the annual meeting of AHRA, the Association for Medical Imaging Management. My name is Brian Casey, Editor-in-Chief of AmpMini.com. And we are here with Dr. Emanuel Kanal. He is Director of MR Services at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. Dr. Kanal, thanks for being with us again.
Thanks so much for having invited me.
Yeah, so it's day 2 of AHRA, Monday. You're giving a talk on relaxivity of contrast agents and why that's important for people to know. So can you maybe summarize a little bit of your talk?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. As with so many other areas, magnetic resonance is not like the other children. In CT, in ultrasound, and almost anything else that we do, when you give a contrast agent, what you're doing is having the contrast agent that you administer show up on the study itself. So when you're doing a CT and you've given an iodinated contrast agent, the kidney is now more dense and it shows up as whiter because you're actually imaging the effect, the physical presence of that contrast agent inside the kidney. With magnetic resonance, it doesn't work that way. For the gadolinium-based contrast agents, we were and still are imaging the hydrogen or the hydrogen nuclei, the protons of the tissues. We're still tuned to hydrogen. But when we give a gadolinium-based contrast agent and it biodistributes, wherever that agent reaches, it can shorten the T1 or affect the properties of the hydrogen. So we're still imaging the same hydrogen of the tissues that we're examining, but we're watching their behavior change because of the proximity on a molecular level, the proximity of that hydrogen to the contrast agents we've administered. So what's relaxivity? Think of it as the potency, the power of the contrast agent. I'm going to give a contrast agent and I'm going to cause a certain tissue to become more intense, whiter, brighter on an MR image. How much of that contrast agent do I have to administer in order to get it to go from this bright to that bright? To get a tissue to enhance requires contrast agent, but it doesn't tell you how much of that agent is required. A higher relaxivity agent, think of it as being more potent. It takes less administered of that agent to get it to reach a certain intensity, and a lower relaxivity agent, you would have to give more of it, or you'd have to have the concentration in that tissue get higher before it would reach that same intensity as even less would have reached had you used a higher relaxivity agent.
So not all contrast agents are created equal, I'm assuming, and different agents probably have different relaxivity properties, correct?
That's absolutely true. In fact, the idea that not all contrast agents are equal is not that self-evident to everyone. In fact, around the world, you'll find that people disagree. Some of the contrast agents, for example, in Europe, as you might recall from some of our previous interviews in the past few years, Europe has done away with the marketing approval for some of the contrast agents, and their rationale has been that the agents are essentially all interchangeable. Let's use agents that retain less just in case there's a safety issue. Well, some of the agents that they got rid of have notably higher relaxivity than some of the other agents that they've retained. So at least in the United States and in many other countries, we're aware of the relaxivity differences. They've been around forever. At least since 2004, we've had major relaxivity differences amongst the tissues, the agents that we use, in the US. And so part of our decision making is based on the safety profiles, but also the relaxivity and the effectiveness of the drug.
Now, AHRA is a meeting for radiology administrators. They're the people who are trying to figure out how much do I budget for contrast use next year, this kind of thing. How can this relaxivity issue affect their day-to-day operations?
Wow, that's a magnificent question. For every time we use any drug, it doesn't make a difference whether it's MRI, CT, any contrast agent we ever use, for any test we ever do, any procedure we do, whether we think about it or not, there are 3 different factors that are there. There is safety, there's efficacy, and there's cost. And how we order them is up to you, and it's up to the specific clinical indication. If you have a higher relaxivity agent, it gives you choice. You could use a full dose of a high relaxivity agent and have greater contrast between the enhancing tissue and the non-enhancing background compared to had you used a full dose of a lower relaxivity agent. So if I have a very small tissue, if I'm trying to detect an extremely tiny early breast cancer, I might want to use the highest relaxivity agent I might get my hands on so that I can have the best chance of detecting even the tiniest, most otherwise subtle lesions. If I have a large lesion, I don't need a lot of relaxivity. Even a small amount of enhancement would be sufficient. So I might get away with using less of a higher relaxivity agent, and thereby save, number one, the administered dose to the patient is less, and number two, the cost to the patient, to the insurance, to the healthcare industry has decreased as well. So in a sense, relaxivity buys you choice. It's the power to use it for diagnostic potential, cost saving, or anything in between.
Interesting. Now, what's the best way for people to find out what their agents are, whether they're high relaxivity or not?
Also a fascinating question. This is like you've prepared for this.
I'm a professional.
There are multiple agents that are out there today that are advertised as high relaxivity. They don't all have the same relaxivity. Some are notably higher than others, even though multiple agents may be advertised as high relaxivity. And even perhaps more importantly, in the very near future, I don't know exactly when, I can't speak for the FDA, but another agent, gadopiclinol is the chemical name, is, I believe, will be imminently approved by the FDA, hopefully in the next half a year, even maybe. And if it is, that has the highest relaxivity of any of the neuroradiologic agents we use to date. So it will change the playing field one more time in the next, hopefully, short-term future.
All right, we'll have something to look forward to.
Absolutely.
Well, as always, thank you so much for being with us.
Truly my pleasure. Thanks again.
Signing off from Phoenix, my name is Brian Casey.